it is not only suggested that we write complex sentences, but also avoid errors. Learners may have frustrations in Task 2, especially writing complex sentences. In order to write great sentences with relative clauses, let's take a look at the general rules of writing them and compare the incorrect and correct sentences containing these relative clauses. Now, under the band descriptor GRA, it is not only suggested that we write complex sentences, but also avoid errors. Although minor errors may not affect you if you aim for a band 6, aiming higher than that will require a good control of grammar and punctuation with very minimal errors. So let's find out the general ways of writing relative clause in order to avoid errors in writing the complex sentence. So first, let's review. A relative clause is a subordinate clause that gives more information about a person or thing. So for this, we can find different relative pronouns, and this may often come after a noun or pronoun, and they can be starting with relative pronouns such as that, which, or who. The first rule is to use who, that, or which when it is the subject of the relative clause. But first, let's take a look at this sentence. We can see that the independent clause is already in the beginning, followed by the prepositional phrase, and then we find the adverb verb that follows the rest of the sentence. And we may find that there might be something missing, and that is the subject before willingly decide. In contrast, we may find the right way of using the relative clause, which begins with who to describe more about professionals who willingly decide to relocate to rural areas in order to teach there. Again, we can find good structure in this sentence with proper application of paraphrasing, as the nouns were reordered, that instead of starting with government, it begins with a method that the government may use, and we can find a paraphrasing of workers to professionals. In addition to that, we can find the application of the adverb clause in order to teach there. Now for this next rule, that can replace which, who, or whom. On the other hand, if the sentence contains an object clause starting with these relative pronouns, it may also omit the relative pronouns. More on that later, but first let's check this sample. We may find that there is a simple mistake here, which is the use of the comma. This may be removed to make this an error-free sentence. The comma is used to separate the dependent clause from the independent clause. But if the dependent clause completes the idea of the independent clause or the main clause, then it is unnecessary to use a comma. Now let's compare. This sentence may begin with since, our adverb clause that we've learned before, and we can find that there is no relative pronoun actually, but in essence, there is the word that is before requiring, so that this is actually representing business. Instead of repeating this object, we may simply remove that so that we may refer to business requiring. All right? Now another thing is we may find that there is no repetition of any word here when compared to this sample that repeated freedom, but we may find only one time here. So we can find the good use of the commas. Another is that is used to comment on a situation or fact. So turning to this first sentence, the independent clause was written at first, and after this prepositional phrase, we may find this adjective clause describing more about males. Then after that, there's is increasing. We may find that this may sound unnatural, as there is no subject before is increasing. So it is better actually to use to multiply, so that we may complete the expression for someone to do something. For males who choose to become house husbands, to multiply. Another is the application of this relative clause while in that situation. It is actually better to just remove this and rely on while, as while describes two things that happen at the same time. Alright, but now when we compare it to the second, we may find there is proper use of the relative clause to explain the tendency using that clause. Also, there is no need to add commas here, as this is already a complete independent clause, but this gives an explanation of tendency. And also we can find only while is used once. Now, for this last rule, use that or who but not which for people. However, we can find that in this sample it is not properly used, as workers was followed by which. In this situation, of course, we should use who. In contrast, we may find workers who experience career advancement and are well compensated, as your adjective clause describing workers is used properly with commas. To separate this clause from the main idea, as this is the main subject and the main verb, followed by this object, a sense of satisfaction, and the verb phrase performing their duties. To complete the expression, a sense of satisfaction doing something. In summary, let's not forget to avoid errors in writing relative clauses. Let's remember that we can use who, that, which as the subject of the relative clause. That can replace which, who, whom, that to comment on a situation or fact, and that or who but not which for people. So that would be all. And for more tips on writing, don't hesitate. Subscribe to our channel and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That would be all. See you next time.